Welcome to the Click Down. I'm glad you've taken the time to listen to us today. I'm your host, Steve Beals. And in today's episode, we're going to discuss the Citrix Global App and Configuration Service to learn a little bit more about what the service is and what it can do. I'm joined today by Prashant Yadav, a lead product manager here at Citrix. Prashant, welcome to the Click Down. I'm glad you could join me today.
Hey, hi Steve. Thank you for having me here. Glad to be
Yeah,
finally part of the Clickdown podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to join me. So, before we dive into the conversation we're going to have today, maybe you can give our listeners a little bit of a background on yourself, your role here at Citrix and the products you oversee.
Yeah, sure. So I have been at Citrix for close to 5 years, and I am a lead product manager at Citrix, and I have worked on quite a different product areas in my tenure. I started with one of the cloud services called as app personalization service. I have looked at auto update service, and I've also worked on Citrix Workspace app for mobile. And in my current role, I am looking at the global app config service, and that is going to be the focus of discussion today.
Awesome. So let's jump right into the discussion, and I guess to begin, like really at a high level, what exactly is the Global App and Configuration Service? And sometimes we refer to it as GACS. So if you hear us referring to it as that, that's what it is. Global App Configuration Service is a mouthful at times, but at a high level, what is this service?
Yeah, sure. I think before we even get into the global app config service or GACS, we call it GACS in short. We need to understand why we even started building this service. So I will just give you a quick brief into what is the problem that our customers or our administrators were facing to begin with. So one of the larger problems with our administrators was that there were just too many ways to configure Citrix Workspace app across the different device types. So, for example, if you were managing a Windows device, you would configure something via a GPO or a registry. You will, if you're a storefront customer, rather than a cloud customer, you will also have an option to edit the web.config file to manage some of the settings. Similarly, if you are a Chrome customer, you have a separate config file. For your HDX settings, you also try to configure things into the default.ica. So there are just too many ways to do certain things, and that creates a lot of overhead from an admin point of view. And apart from that, there is also something called as unmanaged devices in the enterprises. It is becoming more of a reality, and it's not just the company owned devices. There are also BYO or personal devices that these users have. And then you also have contractors who can again bring their own personal device, or they might have a device that has been given to them by a third party vendor. So, as an administrator, it is really tough to manage the experience across these unmanaged devices. And a lot of times, you don't even know how to connect with them in order to improve on their experience. So, all of this leads to a lot of support calls and leads to a bad experience, which in turn also impacts the productivity. So, it also becomes a big problem. And finally, when you talk about MDM, which is a very common way to manage devices, they also have certain limitations that they only allow you to manage device and applications of certain nature. For example, your MDM solution might not cover all the operating systems. And in a typical enterprise today, we have all the different kind of devices adding value in its own different way. For example, somebody can be using a Windows, somebody can be using an iPad or a Samsung Dex or a MacBook or a Chromebook. So there are too many different devices. And finally, the larger problem was we also work with a lot of Citrix partners who add value on top of Citrix. For example, we have certain third-party agents like WebEx VDI optimization plugin or Zoom VDI optimization plugin. That needs to be installed on top of Citrix. Similarly, Citrix also provides certain agents such as EPA agent or Citrix Secure Access agent. And all of these together add value on top of Citrix. But the major problem is how do you distribute it? In case of managed devices, it is still easy. But when it comes to BYO, it is again a big challenge. And that is the reason we ended up building the global app config service. And as the name suggests, the global app config service keeps a Citrix Workspace app in the center, and it allows you to configure, manage, and update experiences centrally for the administrator from a single place across all of these different platforms. So it is your single place to manage everything Citrix and client-side experience for your users. That's what Global App Config Service is doing today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it really is more than just updating a workspace app, right? So I think when it was first introduced a few years ago, I think that's what everyone thinks of it as, but it's come such a far way. You mentioned a few things about administrators and what they're dealing with on a daily basis. So on a day-to-day basis, it really sounds like this service can help me as like a Citrix administrator within a deployment. How can it really help me?
Yeah, so as an administrator, you can have multiple reasons to use Global App Config Service. To give you a few reasons, first of all, it can help you improve your operational efficiency. It is a simplified client app management tool, and it is a central tool. As I mentioned, it can help you manage the experience across all the different operating systems that your end users are on. And as a bonus, it does not differentiate between on-prem or cloud or hybrid deployment. So you can be on either of the deployment as long as you are allowing your client to connect to the Global App Config Service to fetch the settings. It will just work. So you have that kind of a flexibility. Second, as we mentioned in great detail, it allows you to manage setting across both managed as well as BYO devices. So which is a big plus, and this is something that a lot of our customers love and is one of the big reasons why they are adopting it. And again, from an admin control perspective, as you mentioned, auto update is definitely one of the things that you can control. But it's not just auto update. There are many more things as well. For example, you can manage those plugins. You can also manage some of the flagship products that Citrix has. For example, certain app protection based settings can be managed through it. You will be able to manage Citrix Enterprise browser settings via Global App Config Service. You also have a lot of HDX settings that are available for you. So you have a plethora of things. You will definitely find something that your end users are going to find value in if you decide to go ahead and adopt Global App Config.
Yeah, really bringing it into a central location, right? Because a lot of these things I know in the past have been been managed, through GPO or scripts or whatever it is, right? So bringing it into this service obviously is going to really help me as an administrator day to day. You mentioned a few platforms before, and just as a follow up to that, are there any platforms when we think about where the workspace app is that this wouldn't work on? Windows, Mac, Linux, or are we good across the board there?
Yeah, so there is just one platform that we are not supporting today, but it is also under development, and that is Linux. But we do support everything else across the board.
That's great. And before you were talking a little bit about the MDM solutions as well, and what's the differentiator between Global App Configuration Service and an MDM solution?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. So a lot of our administrators do get confused if we are trying to build an MDM solution over here. No, that is not the case. And I will tell you how we are different from them. So MDM solution typically is based on the concept that administrators have to ensure that all the devices which are being used needs to be enrolled with their MDM server. And they in turn install an MDM agent on all of these endpoints. And at a later point of time, these administrators would just try to enforce certain policies at a device level or at a particular application level. For the app to be managed, that app needs to be brought under the Intune ecosystem. And also that app needs to expose certain settings to be managed via the MDM solution. So MDM is more about the device management part of it, whereas Global App Config Service, on the contrary, is primarily focused on Citrix and Citrix experience. It keeps Citrix Workspace app in the center. It starts with store URL, which is like the primary identifier for an administrator to manage the settings. So any setting that you are trying to manage via Global App Config, it is mapped to the store URL. And as I mentioned, it can manage a wide range of client experience. It can be your version control. It can be your plugin management. It can be app protection, HDX experiences, enterprise browser, etc. And because we are primarily focused only on the app, We don't care about the device you are coming from, what kind of deployment type you are on, or what is the operating system your user is coming from. It just works across the board, and that is our key differentiator and where we add value.
Okay, so basically, if I'm a customer and I'm running Intune, right, that's not going to prevent me from running Global App Configuration Service specifically if I'm, for what I want to do with it, right? I can continue using my MDM solution on a daily basis.
Yes, absolutely. You will be able to continue using the MDM solution. It's just that you need to look at the precedence order on what gets priority. So for example, as an administrator, if you're also using GPO, we give a higher priority to GPO, and Global App Config gets the second highest priority. So in case you want Global App Config to manage a certain setting, you need to ensure that it is configured only via Global App Config. If and only if you also have GPO in picture, which can create a conflict.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. So I know a lot of administrators face problems with, not only BOIO and third-party devices, always being on various different client versions, and sometimes they don't have control over that experience. Can this problem be tackled with Global App Configuration Service?
Yeah, absolutely. And to tell you, I have been talking to a lot of different customers, and one of the common problem these customers have is, all these enterprises are working with users who have different kind of devices, and not all of them are managed devices. And one of the customer even told us a story how they have users who are on 60 different versions of Workspace application, which makes the life of an administrator really tough.
Yeah. Wow, 60, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge that comes in with 60 different versions is, as an admin, you cannot, first of all, control the experience. You don't know what is breaking for which user. And if you are looking to roll out a certain feature, you cannot actually go ahead and do that, because you are always scared if you are going to break it for someone who is accessing your store. So it becomes a really big challenge. And that is exactly where auto update version control plays a role. So with auto update version control, what we are uh, telling the administrators is that you don't always have to update to the latest version that Citrix is releasing. Rather than that, we are giving you an option to pick a version between the last three versions that we have released, test it out properly. When you feel confident, you can come to the Global App Config service. You can choose which version do you want your end users to update to. So when I say we provide last three versions, it will be N, N-1, and N-2. So for instance, as an administrator, you have tested N-1. So you can go ahead and configure that all my Windows clients should get updated to the N-1 version. And anyone who is accessing that particular store, when it gets an auto update prompt, it will figure it out by talking to Global App Config that my client needs to be updated to N-1 and not the latest version, which is N. And it will ensure everyone is on a consistent version that the administrator was expecting for. And this in turn allows you to, over a period of time, this in turn will allow you to bring everyone on a consistent version and a more predictable experience, which is a major cost and time saver for the admins.
So that's good to know. And as you're talking through that, it brought me back to when I was working on something earlier last year regarding like Teams optimizations and and customers having support calls because Teams optimization wouldn't be working, and a lot of times it would end up being they weren't on the right client version for the Citrix Workspace app. With that, we may see problems like that. How far back will it go? Like, is it just Workspace app, or sometimes we run across Citrix Receiver, right? Like, will the Global App Configuration Service say, hey, yeah, this user is running Citrix Receiver, we need to get them to one of the N-1 versions, or is there only so far it will go back?
Yes, so I think that is a good question and a much needed one as well. So the idea around it is the Global App Config Service support started from 2109 version. So any client who is on an older than 2109 will not be able to talk to Global App Config. So we need the clients to be on a certain version in order to get the benefits of this particular service. So with that limitation, it will work for all the clients. But for anyone before that particular version, it will be a challenge. So you will still need to ensure that you are able to bring your bring all of these users onto a latest version and take it up from there. But it
Right.
will solve
Yeah.
future problem for you.
Good. Yeah. I mean, hopefully everyone is on a, maybe 2109. I think we know real world it's not the case, but that's good to know that, they have to get to that version. When working with the service, can Citrix admins, can they assign different settings, per Active Directory groups, or does it have to be on like an individual user basis?
Yeah, so this is a roadmap item for us, and this is also asked by a lot of different customers. And I'm glad to tell you that if you are a DAS customer, we are pretty much close to bringing out the support for AD or AAD based groups in March as a tech preview. So if you are a customer who is listening to this podcast and you are interested in getting enrolled, do reach out. I think it is a great feature that will provide you a lot of flexibility where you can assign a different set of settings and its values for a different set of users. So yeah, this is something that we are looking to support, and it is going to come out for DAS users. And we also have the support for on-premises customers coming out soon after that. So that is still under development, but once we bring it out, we will let the customers know, and we will be more than happy to onboard them as well.
Awesome. So you mentioned DAS and you mentioned on premises, which leads into my next question, because I get asked a lot, how can I test this service out? Number one, and the follow up question to that always is, do I need to be a Citrix DAS customer to use this service?
Yes. So the best part about this particular service is, if as an administrator you are just willing to let your clients talk to a particular URL that talks to global app config service, it will just work irrespective of whether you are a DAS customer or not. You can be an on-premises customer, you can be a DAS customer, you can make it work as long as you let your clients talk to GACS and fetch the settings. Now, you might be wondering that if you are an on-premises customer, how do I even get started? So any on-premises customer will have the option to onboard to a Citrix Cloud account. So that will be the step one for you. If you go ahead and create a Citrix Cloud account for yourself, you will see in the particular user interface that you can go to Workspace config, and within Workspace config, there is our admin UI called as app configuration. And within that app configuration tab is where you go ahead and start configuring your settings. And step one for you within that UI is going to be, you just prove the ownership of your storefront URL or the gateway URL, because we need to validate that it is you who owns that URL. Once you have proved your claim to that particular URL, it is done. You can just go ahead and start configuring the settings, and after that, your clients will start with the fetching process around it. And if you have already done all of this, and you are just looking at how can I go ahead and test it out, I don't want to roll out these settings to all my prod users. Can I test it out for a particular store before doing that? Yes, you can do that as well. We have a concept of channels in the Global App Config service. You can switch between a test channel and a production channel. So when you select a test channel and you also enroll your device into a test channel, it will ensure that whenever you are accessing the same store, you are going to get the settings that are corresponding to that particular channel itself. You can, and once you feel confident about the experience, you can take those settings and clone it into the production and then roll it out for your end users. So that will allow you to both first onboard yourself into a global app config service and then also test it out to feel confident before you decide to go ahead and roll it out for all your end users.
That's great. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Like, I wish when I was a Citrix administrator years and years ago, I had this service. Right? I mean, it really seems like it would have made my day easier. So, but I'm glad that we have this now, and that people can start to use it, and we can start seeing some.
Yeah, it is certainly a great value add, and we are looking.
Yes, it really is.
Any gap that exists today. So we are open to any feedback that is coming in from the customers. We are looking to make it even better.
Awesome. So Prashant, that's all the questions I had for you today. So, but I really thank you for coming on. I think this is, really, really great to hear about this service. I know we're trying to get the word out there. I personally think it's a real game changer for Citrix administrator, right? It's convenient to use. It's easy to use. I think it's, going to, do a lot of time savings for administrators who, and centralize a lot of their workspace app configurations and the plugins and everything else, and really make their overall Citrix client experience, a lot better.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
So if you're interested in learning more about the Global App Configuration Service, feel free to visit Citrix Tech Zone. We have a few tech briefs out there and an FAQ. We'll dive in a little bit more on how this service works. We're going to be working on a POC guide that's going to help you walk you through testing the service. So, Prashant was mentioning some of the test features we have. So we're going to have a guide that helps you with that. And, with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And as always, this has been the Click Down.